And hello, you're watching Scotland at 7. It's Friday the 1st of July, and I'm Hugh Stewart. So, broadcasting tonight from the Garden Studio, so thanks for joining me. We have a short programme tonight, no guests, so I'm going to read through the main news stories. But first of all, I'm going to begin with a Ukraine update on day 127 of Russia's illegal assault on their neighbour. First, we hear that 19 people at least, including 2 children, have been confirmed dead after a Russian missile strike on an apartment building in Odessa, in southern Ukraine, according to Ukrainian officials. A further 38 people, including 6 children and a pregnant woman, were hospitalized with injuries, Ukraine's security service said. Ukraine's Deputy Foreign Minister Yevgeny Yenin said that there were no military targets or infrastructure in the vicinity of the area struck by missiles. Speaking at the scene, Yenin said that rescue operations were ongoing, but we don't expect to find anyone alive. Ursula von der Leyen has told Ukraine that there is a long road ahead for its bid to become a European Union member, but that Europe will be by your side every step of the way. Volodymyr Zelensky said that Ukraine's path to European Union membership should not take years or decades, and vowed to make Ukrainians' part in the process perfect, in his words. The situation in the eastern Ukrainian city of Lysychansk is extremely difficult as Russian forces' continuous shelling makes it impossible for civilians to evacuate, officials say. Russia's Foreign Secretary Sergei Lavrov said on Thursday yesterday that a new Iron Curtain is descending between Russia and the West, and that Moscow would not trust Washington and Brussels from now on. Russia is using inaccurate missiles from the old Soviet era for more than 50% of its strikes in Ukraine, leading to significant loss of civilian life, a brigadier general in Ukraine's armed forces said on Thursday. President Biden declared that the US and NATO allies will stick with Ukraine as long as it takes, as the military alliance promised hundreds of thousands more troops to defend Eastern Europe. Estonia and Latvian defence ministries signed a letter of intent on Thursday at the NATO summit in Madrid for joint procurement of medium-range anti-aircraft systems. And finally, in the Ukraine roundup, President of France Emmanuel Macron said that France would deliver 6 Caesar howitzers and a significant number of armed vehicles to Ukraine. He added that the NATO allies meeting in Madrid unanimously decided to boost humanitarian and military aid to Ukraine. Day 127. We will continue broadcasting Scotland to cover events in Ukraine, but let's move over to Ireland and the first of various stories on Brexit tonight. Leo Varadkar, who's Ireland's Deputy Prime Minister, has accused the UK government of risking the breakup of the United Kingdom and making shocking blunders over the Northern Ireland Protocol. Mr Varadkar said that Boris Johnson's administration had been undemocratic and disrespectful, and tacitly accused it of being dishonest and dishonourable. The Taoiseach made this sharp attack in a BBC interview on Thursday night, days after the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill cleared its first hurdle in the House of Commons. The bill risks undermining the provisions of a Brexit deal in respect to Northern Ireland. I think that's a strategic mistake for people who want to maintain the Union, because if you continue to impose things on Northern Ireland that a clear majority of people don't want, that means more people will turn away from the Union. It's a peculiar policy coming from a government that purports to want to defend the Union, he said. Mr Varadkar, who is due to succeed Michael Martin as Taoiseach later this year, said he found it shocking and hard to accept that Downing Street sought unilaterally to change the protocol. What the British government is doing now is very undemocratic and very disrespectful to the people in Northern Ireland, because it's taking that power away from the Assembly. Any honourable government would honour a treaty it had agreed and abide by international law, he said. It's not normal for a democratic government in a respected country to sign a treaty and then try to pass domestic legislation to override it, he said. Mr Varadkar also rubbished comments from Liz Truss, the UK Foreign Secretary, who said the EU's proposed solutions would worsen bureaucratic impediments. Well, there are some people clearly who are able to say a square is a circle, but this is just not the facts. Asked about a statement from Brandon Lewis, the Northern Ireland Secretary, that relations with Dublin were great, Mr Varadkar replied, "In my political lifetime, I've never seen relations that bad. London did not want to work with Dublin and was picking fights with Brussels and not being even-handed in Belfast," he said. Separately, in a letter to the Financial Times, Adrian O'Neill, Ireland's ambassador to the UK, rebutted an opinion piece by Liz Truss which had defended the protocol legislation. "It would destabilise Northern Ireland by creating a legal and political vacuum," he said. And now on to our second story, which is really Brexit connected. New figures from S&P Global and the CIPS, that's the Chartered Institute of Purchasing, and the manufacturing PMI, which refer to purchasing managers, recorded a reading of 58.8 in June, a low down from 54.6 in May. I must explain what those figures mean. It's an index held by purchasing managers, which suggests how much they're going to purchase in stocks looking at a period ahead. So if the purchasing index is down, it means we can expect that manufacturing is going to be down. Rob Dobson, the director of S&P Standards & Poor's Global Market Intelligence, said that foreign demand has been stifled by Brexit, as well as impacted by the war in Ukraine, by transport disruption, and by global economic slowdown. Firms have also highlighted that ongoing Brexit-related disruption and weaker growth has impacted new demand from the EU. The latest survey showed that the consumer goods sector was among the worst affected by the dip in new orders, which will be adding to the rising cost of living. The S&P's Treasury spokesman has said the total of new export orders has also contracted for the fifth month in a row. The S&P's Treasury spokesperson is Alison Thewlis MP, and she said these are yet more figures showing the impact the Tories' bad Brexit deal is having on one of our key industries. Manufacturing is vital to Scotland's economy, implying more than 169,000 jobs and making up for over half of Scotland's international exports. In 2014, she said, Scotland was told by the other Westminster parties, who are now all pro-Brexit parties, that Scotland would remain in the EU if we voted no to independence. We were dragged out of the EU against our will anyway, and so Scotland continues to pay the price for a Brexit we didn't vote for. Further Brexit story, and this is also bad news. Trade performance has fallen to its worst level since records began. The UK's current account deficit now sits at 8.3% of GDP, which is increasing from an average of 2.6% across all of 2021. The current account deficit refers to the difference between exports and imports, and it's in the negative. The SNP's shadow international trade secretary is Drew Henry MP, and he said that the impact of Brexit proved that Scotland would benefit from joining the ranks of similar-sized independent neighbouring countries who continuously outperform the UK on wealth, happiness and fairness. Referencing the Scottish Government's Building a New Scotland paper issued recently, Mr Henry said that Scotland has endless potential if it chooses independence. Responding to the figures, the SNP's International Trade Secretary, who is Mr Henry, said, "This is the latest in a long list of reports that highlight the catastrophic impact Brexit has had on the UK's trade. Instead of attempting to resolve these issues, though, Westminster continue to bury their head in the sand and kid on that their Brexit obsession will come good." He said this was in stark contrast to the Scottish Government's vision for Scotland to escape this Brexit nightmare and aims to build strong links with our closest trading partners, neighbours and allies. Mr Henry said that Building a New Scotland paper explains in no uncertain terms that Scotland can become a wealthier, fairer and happier society with independence, adding, with Keir Starmer and Anas Sarwar, who refused to discuss the possibility of rejoining the EU, there is now only one clear path for Scotland, and that is independence. Excuse me. Looking ahead to the forthcoming UK general election, which will be in 2024 at the latest, unless a snap election is called before then. The Guardian today reports that Labour leader Keir Starmer is seeking to head off any Conservative Party campaign attacks using their coalition of chaos mantra in the event of Scottish MPs holding the balance of power following the next general election at Westminster. And he's doing that by ruling out any possibility of a coalition or political agreement with the SNP. By ruling out a return to European freedom of movement or to rejoining the EU, Mr Starmer is seeking to regain some of the red wall seats in the north of England lost to the Conservatives in the 2019 general election. In pursuing these policies, Mr Starmer risks alienating voters in Scotland who voted overwhelmingly to remain in the EU in the 2016 referendum. Scottish Labour leader Anas Sarwar, who has been following head office and advocating the same hard line that a Labour government would not ask to rejoin the EU. The strategy is to exclude the SNP from any post-election agreement and for the Labour Party to opt for minority government in the hope that they can accuse the SNP of voting with the Tories. However, this is liable to sound a bit hollow in Scotland, where Labour and Conservative councillors have gone into coalition in some local authorities, in spite of the SNP being the largest party. Next story, the UK government's move to change legislation to allow employers to use temporary workers to cover staffing gaps during strikes shows a hasty and hostile approach to industrial relations, according to Scottish Employment Minister Richard Lochhead. In his letter to the Minister for Small Business, Consumers and Labour Markets, Paul Scully, Mr Lochhead has accused the UK government of having an aggressive anti-worker and anti-trade union agenda. Setting out the Scottish Government's opposition to these changes, he said, this move only served to show why Scotland should have full control of its own employment laws. Mr Lochhead said he had echoed the sentiments of the First Minister of Scotland in believing that these changes represent a stark example of this UK government's anti-trade unionism, which the Scottish Government utterly deprecates. He said that the Scottish Government believes they should respect workers across the economy, respect public sector workers, and should seek to negotiate fair resolutions to disputes, particularly at this time of soaring inflation, which Mr Lochhead said had been so exacerbated in the UK by the folly of Brexit. Mr Lochhead went on to say that in Scotland we have embraced the concept of fair work, and it's disheartening to see the Scottish Government's progressive activity in this regard being put at risk by association with the UK Government's ill-thought-out, hasty and hostile approach to industrial relations. Mr Lochhead concluded by saying, these changes are a direct contradiction to our position, and as such, we will oppose them. Over to the US now for a story on climate change and the Donald Trump-inspired Supreme Court. The US Supreme Court has imposed limits on the federal government's authority to issue regulations to reduce carbon emissions from power plants. That was yesterday in a ruling which undermines President Biden's plans to tackle climate change. The Supreme Court's 6-3 ruling constrained the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA's authority to regulate greenhouse gas emissions from existing coal and gas-fired power plants under the landmark Clean Air Anti-Pollution Law. The Biden administration is currently working on new regulations. The court's 6 Conservative judges were in the minority in the discussion authored by the Chief Justice John Roberts, with the 3 Liberals dissenting. President Biden called the ruling another devastating decision that aims to take our country backwards. While this decision risks damaging our nation's ability to keep our air clean and combat climate change, I will not relent in using my lawful authorities to protect public health and to tackle the climate crisis, President Biden said in a statement. The President said he directed his legal team to work with the Justice Department and the affected agencies to review the ruling and to find ways under federal law to protect against pollution, including emissions which could cause climate change. The ruling is likely to have implications beyond the EPA as it raises new legal questions about any big decisions made by federal agencies. The court's Conservative majority has signalled scepticism towards expansive federal regulatory authority. The justices overturned the 2021 decision by the US Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit, which struck down ex-President Trump's Affordable Clean Energy Rule, which imposes limits on the EPA's authority to regulate emissions from existing power plants. Thursday's ruling was based on what's called major questions, the legal doctrine that requires explicit congressional authority for action on issues of broad importance and societal impact. The justices in January appeared to embrace the theory when it blocked the Biden administration's vaccine or test policy for large businesses, a key element in its plan to tackle the COVID-19 pandemic. The court's invocation of this doctrine sends a signal that the justices will be a major obstacle to federal agencies seeking to implement broad policies of national importance. This decision will constrain the EPA's ability to issue any regulations on power plants that push for an ambitious national shift in energy policy towards renewable sources. As such, it will hamstring the administration's ability to curb the power sector's emissions, which is about a quarter of the US's greenhouse gas emissions. Over to Afghanistan now. We hear that 170 people, or perhaps more, who worked for the British Embassy in Kabul remain in hiding in Afghanistan in fear for their lives almost a year after the Taliban took back its country. A list of Afghans currently in hiding shows almost 200 former interpreters, security guards and local staff waiting for a response from the Ministry of Defence and the Home Office, the departments responsible for relocating people at risk. All of those on the list are eligible for transfer to the UK under the Afghan Relocations and Assistance Policy, as ARAP, intended to bring those formerly employed by the UK government and their family members to safety in Britain. One man who was employed by Garda World, a security subcontractor to the MOD, who worked at the British Embassy for 10 years, he and his children have fled their home and hidden in a basement in a village outside the city, surviving on one meal of boiled rice a day. In August 21, as the Taliban took Kabul, he was on a coach with his family, due to be evacuated when a suicide bomb inside the airport struck the bus a security bomb inside the airport forced the bus to turn back, and he's been in hiding ever since. Eligible Afghans are scattered in Afghanistan, Iran, Pakistan and Turkey, and hiding and terrified, and have very no access to safe routes to the UK until the relocation application has been processed. Sarah de Jong, the co-founder of the Sula Alliance, which supports Afghans who worked for the British government to resettle in the UK, said, "The ARAP team's slowness and unresponsiveness leaves applicants in limbo while fearing for their lives. The processing of applications need to be expedited, and applicants should be given clear timelines, which will also help to reduce duplicate applications from Afghans simply desperate to get a response." It is the latest criticism of the government handling of the crisis, with a damning report from the Foreign Affairs Committee in May. That's the Foreign Affairs Committee of the House of Commons. The report said there's been a total absence of plans to evacuate Afghans who supported the UK mission without being directly employed, which has put lives at risk. In response to a written question last week, Armed Forces Minister James Heappey said one ARAP case dating from when the scheme opened remains unresolved. He added, "It relates to an individual we have contacted 3 times requesting further information relating to their eligibility." However, earlier this month, in response to a parliamentary question, Mr Heappey said that decisions on only 2 of the 3,226 ARAP applications received since April 22 have been processed. That's only 2 out of 3,226. Mr Heappey told the MPs that 9,500 Afghans have been relocated to the UK under the ARAP scheme, but added, "We think we've got about the same to go in terms of the number of people who are eligible." Now on to the drugs death priority. International experts and people affected by drugs are being joined by third sector and local government representatives to support the national mission to reduce drug deaths. The National Drugs Mission Oversight Group has met for the first time and will reconvene every 3 months. The group was set up by the new Minister for Drugs Policy, Angela Constance, to provide security, to challenge and expert advice to the Scottish Government and the wider sector, The services are adapted and improved to save more lives. I'll read that again. So, Angela Constance wants the new group to provide security and to challenge the Scottish Government and to provide scrutiny and to challenge the Scottish Government and to also to provide expert advice. Hope that's clear. Among the members are Dr. Sharon Stancliffe of the New York Health Department, Dr. Michael Casacin, who's a special advisor to the World Health Organization's Regional Office for Europe, WHO Europe, and Professor Thomas Kerr, PhD, who heads up the Social Medicine Division of the University of British Columbia. Angela Constance said, "I thank all those who have joined the oversight group, and following a constructive first meeting, I took forward to hearing their ideas on how we can improve and accelerate our efforts to tackle the drugs death emergency. The first year of the national mission was about building the foundations for change, rolling out the medical assisted treatment as MAT standards, expanding access to residential rehabilitation, setting a new treatment target, increasing funding to community and grassroots organisations, and preparing the ground for innovations such as safe drugs consumption facilities. Now we must focus on delivering on those foundations, and the Oversight Group will provide scrutiny, challenge and expert advice on the national mission, including the government response to the final recommendations of the Drugs Death Task Force. These are expected towards the end of July." Angela Constance continued, "As we move on to this next stage of our efforts to tackle this public health emergency, backed by £250 million over the course of this Parliament, I am more determined than ever to bring about the changes required to improve and save lives." Before we move on, we should note that drugs deaths have started to fall in Scotland. Now let's move on to healthier food choices. After I'll drink some fresh water. Free of additives. Like proposal to limit the promotion of food and drink high in fat, sugar or salt have been published. The Scottish Government's consultation seeks views on restricting the promotion of confectionery, cakes, crisps, savoury snacks and sugary soft drinks at checkouts and in front of the store and also multi-buy discounts. The aim is to reduce the health harms associated with poor diet and higher weight. The consultation will help assess what impact the proposed restrictions would have on businesses and public health, including on health inequalities, and it will run for 12 weeks beginning on the 23rd of September this year. Minister for Public Health Marie Todd said, "Our diets remain too high in calories, fat, sugar and salt, which can have serious consequences for our overall health. In Scotland, 2 out of 3 adults are overweight or obese, with those living in the poorest areas more likely to be overweight and experience the worst harm as a result. We know that promotions can encourage overconsumption and impulse buying. By restricting the promotion of less healthy foods and drink, we can better support people to make healthier choices and to create a Scotland where everyone eats well and has a healthy weight." Final story now. Children from low-income families will benefit from free childcare activities and healthy food as part of a £10 million summer programme. Available to children and young people aged 5 to 14 years old who need it most. The funding has been allocated to local authorities to supplement existing holiday homes programmes and to develop new ones. Education Secretary Shirley Ann Somerville said, "School holidays can be expensive for families, especially when household bills are soaring. This funding means children and young people who really need it will be able to access coordinated childcare activities and nutritious food over the summer. They will have opportunities to play, to socialise and to access a range of activities that broaden their experiences and supplement their learning. Support will be targeted at the 6 priority family types at greatest risk of poverty, including lone parent families and families with a disabled adult or child. We have a national mission to tackle child poverty and, along with £21.75 million in funding for alternative holiday food provision for families eligible for free school meals, this offer will provide much needed support during the summer. Okay, so that's a new programme from the Scottish Government for the school holidays. Okay, so that's our stories for tonight. And so let me wind up by thanking you for watching, first of all, in our unconventional broadcast tonight. We might do more of this again. I'm here in the garden office because I'm afraid I've tested positive for COVID this week, so you'll probably find the voice is a bit husky, but I thought it was unwise to go in public transport. But let me just point out then, that shows the kind of flexibility we have at Broadcasting Scotland. I've been saying before that thanks to your funding, we have some very expensive equipment and technologies and methods and skills. And so I wasn't able to go into the studio tonight, but we were still able to show the programme. And we can, in fact, do that from anywhere. And if you want to help us, if you want to help make more programmes, then please, first of all, you can join us looking at the list below. The link below shows you how you can subscribe and become one of our supporters. If you look on that link, we can see starting at £5 a month, you can become one of the people who is keeping Broadcasting Scotland going. And I know a lot of you are watching tonight or later, so thank you for that. So we're going to ask you to do two other things following our really pretty successful fundraiser earlier a couple of months ago. What we need now, of course, is to increase the number of people who are watching the programme and increase the number of subscribers. So do us a favour, please, and pass us on. Try and get more people in our family. Of course, since we now have the announcement that the referendum is going to be in October next year, we need better scrutiny of Scottish politics. We believe at Broadcasting Scotland that needs to be done here, based in Scotland, and not through London-based media. I know most of you watching, I expect all of you watching probably agree with that, but we do need to expand the team, both the number of viewers and also the people who are able to provide logistics and maybe in front of camera support. I know some people have contacted us recently, seeing if we can help, so I'll be glad to speak to them as soon as we can. There's a lot of jobs, a lot of areas where your skills could be employed, and so please get in touch if you'd like to help us join the team. We're going to face a very interesting year and a half, aren't we, in Scottish politics. So that's it from me tonight. Andrew will be back on Sunday lunchtime with the full Scottish, and I'll see you again next week. So thanks for supporting us, and thanks for watching. I'll see you later.